nice to see so many people here. Our third and final webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. We know it's an incredibly busy and stressful time of year. We'll go ahead and get started. So today we're focused on advocacy. And so our guiding question today is going to be, how are we empowering our bilingual families to be advocates? So we really want to be thinking about how are we really partnering with them to make key decisions in our classrooms and in our schools, and really how are we bringing them in, and how are we not just communicating with them, but really allowing them to be real stakeholders in what goes on in our schools. So quick agenda, we're going to be doing a quick bit of housekeeping, go over the framework and show you some new Padlet resources. We'll reflect on our last session. We'll talk about current practice, research, some new tools we have to share with you, and then how we all might apply this in our classrooms. So for our housekeeping items, one thing we wanted to let you know is that we have a social media account. We have a Facebook page and a Twitter account. And if you would like to follow us or share those with colleagues, that's the main place we're going to be sharing our finalized tools. Once we have them all finished, we'll be sharing them bit by bit through social media and talking a little bit about them there. We also have a Read webpage, so we will have all of our tools housed there. And once they're all finalized in the end of June or the beginning of July, we'll send that link out to all of you, because you are in a lot of ways really shaping what those tools are going to look like. So we want to make sure you all have access to the complete toolkit when it's finished. So along those same lines, if you signed up for a tool review, the deadline to submit that is May 28th. And that is really helping us. So we take that information and we immediately go in and revise our tools, and we're making them better, and we're using your ideas to create new tools. So that's really helping us be able to help teachers really everywhere to use this to communicate better with bilingual families.
Leslie, can I jump in really quick about that?
Yeah.
I had sent an email out to all of you. You should have, or all of you who signed up to engage in the tool review. So you either received an email about tool review 1, collection 1, or collection 2, or collection 3, or collection 4. So we kind of broke it up. We do understand it is a very busy time of year right now. And that if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you feel like you know, this is just a lot, even if you want to just do, as much as you can. And if you feel that you need a little bit more wiggle room, a few days after May 28th, go ahead and just respond to that email I sent out, and we can work with you on that. We appreciate any feedback that you have. And I understand that, it's going to take some time, but we estimated about 2 hours. And that's not for each of the tools, but that's for the collection of tools. So each collection has about 5 to 6 tools in there. So, we tried to balance it out. Julie actually did an amazing job with that. Some of the things in there are really short, and some of them, we made sure to kind of balance it out. There's a couple short ones in there. There's a couple more lengthier ones in there. And so if you could provide some feedback on each of those, we would greatly appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't get an email, I think there was only 1 or 2 people who decided they didn't want to do the tool review, or maybe I have that backwards. Maybe they didn't want to do the webinars and they wanted to do the tool review. But if you did not receive a tool review email and you would like to be a part of that, let us know.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, and then your time will be compensated via e-gift cards for all of the activities that you are engaged in. So what we do is at the end, once we have all of the activities completed, then we process the payment for everybody. So you'll get an email with your gift card, and that will probably come to you sometime in July. Unfortunately, processing does take a while, but we'll do our best to keep you updated, let you know when you can expect it. If you signed up for focus groups, we're going to have 2 focus group sessions. So we want you to be able to get these on your calendar. You don't have to do both. You can choose one. And those are going to be June 1st and June 7th. And so during that time, you'll just, we'll ask you really open-ended questions, and you'll share your ideas and your stories about communicating with families. And then there is a possibility that we might be able to extend this project into the fall. And we're hoping that works out, because we would love to engage with all of you as you're in your classrooms and starting off the year, thinking about how do I want to engage with parents this year. So if you are interested in further engagement and do more hands-on in your classroom, try this out, let us know how it went, get some feedback from parents on how things went, that kind of thing, then be looking for an email from us in the next month or two. And of course, if you have any ideas or requests for additional tools at any time, please let us know, because we're always looking for those. Any questions or comments on any of these?
Leslie, there was a question that came in about what time on June 1st and June 7th. And we had selected from 4 to 5 because it's after school, and we figured probably the same time that we're doing the webinars might be helpful. So that was our plan. But if you have a different idea, Leslie, I'm going to say it's safe to, maybe a case-by-case basis. I'm happy to make whatever time works, as long as we can get people to engage in some small group.
Yeah,
discussions.
sure.
So if 4 to 5 sounds good to you, we'll go with that. But if not, you have a preference, just let us know.
Anything else? All right, so here's our framework that we introduced during the first webinar. And we revisited this last time to talk about relationships. And today we're going to focus on advocacy. So before we dive into advocacy, let's take a few minutes to share out if anybody tried anything new with relationships, if you tried any of the tools, if you implemented any of the ideas that we talked about last time, or had a new idea about relationships. Now would be a great time. We want to hear from you.
And I know a couple of you have responded on the Padlet. So if you want to pull up the Padlet, I put the Padlet link in the chat for you. You can pull that up and feel free to share aloud. And we would also love it if you could share some of your thoughts under the relationship application column. So you just kind of have to move a little bit over, right past the tools, and there's the questions, and you'll see that some of your colleagues responded. We would appreciate it if you put your name on there, because that's how we know that you've completed that extended learning. I don't know who put in the first one. So if you were that person, we'd love to hear from you. And I see that Leah and Gabriella and Christy were able to put in a little something there too. So if you guys wouldn't mind sharing out loud.
That first one was mine. I'm just reading what I wrote because, it's been a whole week.
I know.
Sorry. It's been a marathon of a week. Okay. So that questionnaire, like that cultural survey, I really liked that because that's similar to what we send out. But we don't have quite as many questions. Obviously, it's a little bit more pared down, but I did like some of those questions that you had included to get more of the cultural background and language experience rather than just like, oh yeah, you graduated high school or you graduated college, but like just to get more information. But like, I feel like a lot of that just comes from one-on-one meetings. So maybe at the like parent teacher conference, being able to ask some of those more culturally relevant questions was an exciting idea. And then I loved your bookmarks because they're so like handy, easy to just throw in, print it out, easy prep, easy reference for the parents. And then that family fun jar also looks like a fun idea for the summer.
That's great. Laura, I'm so glad you brought up the bookmarks because I wanted to let you guys know, do you know that they're also available in several different languages? So we have posted the link for those translated items. All the way to the right, you'll find on your Padlet, you'll find a section that says Multilingual Translated Tools. And Leslie is awesome. She put them all in a drive for us. And so you'll find them there. If you click on that link, and you can click into any one of those languages and you'll see the magnets in there, and you'll see the bookmarks in there. You'll see all sorts of things in there. And the surveys. Some of them are still being translated right now, but like I just clicked into the Russian and the Vietnamese, and you'll notice that we have the cultural values survey translated, the parent communication survey translated, as well as the pocket guides and the bookmarks and the magnets.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that with our surveys, even as we were developing them for a lot of the questions, we were feeling like, oh, this would be so much better in like a one-on-one interview or in a conversation with the families. And so we encourage you, to take a look at the surveys and then pull questions from it to use to talk to your families. Maybe you're using Google Translate or other resources to communicate the same questions with them. But we just feel like you get so much more information that way. Does anybody else want to share out anything they've been thinking about or trying out? All right. So this is, that's just the QR code for the Padlet. So you have that link already. Share your ideas here. We just did that. Okay. Soha.
All right, so we are going to continue on, and we're going to take a moment just to reflect as we start talking about advocacy and really delving in deeper. One of the key things we really wanted to talk about was the difference between family involvement versus family engagement. And the distinction is really critical as we move into our focus of advocacy for today. We're really, again, delving in deeper. So with each session that we've done, it takes it to a bit of a different level. And so when we're talking about family involvement, we're talking about things that are school centered. So we're involving parents in activities that are happening in school. We're kind of leading the way to these different ideas and things that are happening. Whereas when it's family engagement, it's more parent centered. And we try to get parents to help come up with those ideas and help gear the direction that certain things are going in. When we go back and look at family involvement, it's promoting ideas to parents. So again, really telling parents, this is what we're going to do. This is our plan for the year. And then looking at the other end of that in engagement, we're turning into eliciting ideas from our families. Again, really listening to their ideas. And I think there's a very, very important part to keep in mind in all of this, because it's really easy to, express our ideas, and they are probably absolutely wonderful ideas. But when you help elicit those responses and ideas from families, they're taking more of the ownership in this. It's really letting them be more engaged and be more invested in what's happening. And then again, we're looking at educators that are identifying criteria to evaluate success when we're thinking about involvement. And when we think about engagement, it's more of needs and priorities that emerge from our school community. And so that's why we were thinking those surveys are really such a good idea, because we get to hear what our families want. So we know from years of teaching, we know to an extent what parents are looking for, what ideas, but we also know that everyone's coming from a different background. And so hearing those different views and the different ideas that families have is really making them hopefully become more part of the school community on a deeper level. So I just wanted you to take a moment to think about family involvement versus family engagement. And let's talk for a moment about your experiences, whether it's with your school or with you personally in your classrooms. Are you feeling the difference in these? Do you feel like engaging with the families is, how does that work for you? And how can you take things maybe to a different level when we're thinking about those two terms, involvement versus engagement? So if you want to take a moment to think and then share out your thoughts and ideas when you're looking at these two in focus.
I feel like family involvement is what we're really good at and where our strengths lie, because we're really good at, being like, here's a great idea. Let me share it with you. Here you go. Oh my gosh, I've done this before. You're gonna love it. Whereas like trying to elicit those responses and have those deeper level conversations where the engagement is a lot harder and more time consuming and doesn't always happen as naturally, or especially if you have a language barrier or cultural barriers, it's much harder to achieve. And I think with this year, especially given all of the crazy circumstances, family involvement has been basically 100% of the time, but engagement has been very limited, just given, especially this year. But in general, I would say it's probably lopsided anyway.
Such a good point. And we can reiterate that over and over again. This year is unprecedented. It's already challenging enough to just kind of get by with what we're doing. But you're right. In general, there are times where it's just family involvement is an easier process. So that is what we do best. You're absolutely right. You made very good points. Thank you, Laura.
I think beyond it just being easier, I think that it's always been seen as our job to do it that way. Like I've had parents this year who in the beginning had a very difficult time becoming almost their child's teacher, right? And they almost informed me of, if that burden was taken off my shoulders, it'd be easier for me to have my child do what they need to do for you. Meaning, tell me what to do, right? And give me less of have me do it with my child, which different parents, we have all types of different parents, right? We have those, and then we have the really involved parents, and then a plethora of kinds of parents, right? But with that, I think I've always seen myself like as the teacher that tries to involve parents as much as I can, because that's how I see that they see me, as the parent involvement type of teacher. I think when it comes to family engagement, like it was just mentioned, it's more work not only for me, but for them. And that's where it gets tricky. Am I asking too much of the parents, right? But now seeing it side to side, I would love to be the type of teacher that does more of the engagement. And now keeping it in mind, maybe I'll try some new things this coming year to try to change that around. And again, be more of the engagement type.
Again, really good points that you mentioned there. Thank you for sharing that.
I was just going to say, looking at these, yes, like from a teacher perspective, the family involvement, these are activities you can do with your child, comes naturally to us. And then when I see the family engagement as a teacher and as a parent myself, I look at that as more like parent meetings, like the ELAC meetings, the PTA meetings, the town hall meetings that we have. And so looking at these side by side, it would something for me to take away is like, how can we make the family engagement part more fun, like we make the family involvement part, so they'll want to come.
I love that you mentioned that because it's something that it's definitely a challenge. It's definitely something that is probably not done as often. And that's why we feel like it is so important to start taking that next step into thinking about these. But like you said, making it creative. And we do have some things that we're going to be creating to do exactly what you said, Erica. Try to make it more of something that parents are going to want to do and take pride in doing and making it more fun. Very good points.
I was going to agree with Laura. She hit it on the head as far as I'm concerned. The family engagement would have to be very thoughtful in the approach. Fun would be a great approach to that, because I think oftentimes those kinds of engagements are very intimidating to families and parents, and they don't feel that they have valuable input to offer. And so I think if we made it, in a format that was very, relaxed yet and accessible to everyone, to make them feel comfortable, so that we can get them to attend and to express themselves in a safe environment where they feel valued. But I also feel like the avenue to that is to have a lot of fun family involvement activities throughout the year that are low pressure, where people can have fun, get to know each other. So if they build up a comfort level, then we can push them into that next step of that family engagement and get them to feel more comfortable in giving their input.
Absolutely. So you made a good point. In some ways, they do go hand in hand, where if you have more family involvement, hopefully that will elicit parents to get more comfortable with the family engagement. Good point.
In this conversation, all your ideas are making me wonder if there are ways, instead of thinking family engagement is going to happen, at that one ELAC meeting or whatever, can we bring it more into our classrooms and make it more of an everyday experience? Like you said, make it informal, make it fun, make it, instead of this big intimidating meeting, can it happen in like smaller informal chunks, like really regularly?
Well, when I look at this, I think all of us agree that family involvement is a little bit easier. We do a lot of that as teachers in general. The family engagement, you have to build those relationships first, and often it's put on the teachers to do all of it. And so one more thing on our plates, especially this year, is really difficult. And so I think building a cadre of families that are very involved and very leader oriented, and having them kind of take the lead as opposed to us always dictating, is also a way that can happen in a more not normal, but in a more organic fashion. Whereas if the parents are drawing those people in, it's not always us doing it. And if the parents are talking to each other and saying, hey, we're doing this tonight, why don't you come? It'll be really fun. Then A, it takes it off of us. And B, it's more of a community thing as opposed to just, us.
Such good ideas. Again, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today, is how do we give parents the tools they need so that they can help engage other families as well. And it is really hard for us as teachers and educators to let go. We want to be able to go ahead and take the lead, and letting go and stepping back a little bit and giving them that opportunity is a really good point. Once again, thanks, Paula.
I also feel like that survey that we talked about sending out first with families would help get some of those eliciting ideas from them in more of a comfortable environment instead of them having to share it out in front of a group, and then maybe taking those and creating those family engagement nights based off what we find families have needs of, or what their needs are for literacy events, and then kind of going from there once they feel comfortable sharing out in those groups.
Good point. And a lot of these, when we talk about advocacy, it does also include more of a school-wide effort. So it's not just you as a teacher, it's also now bringing in our administrators and making sure that other staff and faculty are kind of all aboard. So it becomes kind of the way that the nature of your school. So it becomes just a natural part of your school environment. And I think that's another key part, is everybody in school really being on board with this. And it can be a bit intimidating in so many different ways. And Erica put in a comment saying that in years past, her school did coffee with the principal. And this year they did a Zoom meeting, so parents had a way to connect and bring up questions or concerns. And that's another great thing, having your principal be more involved on a more personal level. So again, it's making parents feel like they are being heard and that their opinions really do count. Really good point. And that's such an easy thing that can be done, is a coffee with the principal or breakfast with the principal. Excellent. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. And we're going to take some time to do some reflection on our current practice. And we're going to think about these 3 different topics. And so what I want you to think about today, as far as engagement, is how do we engage bilingual families as key decision makers? And how do we encourage bilingual families to take on advisory, leadership, and mentorship roles? When we're talking about feedback, I want you to think about, what feedback do we receive from bilingual families? How do we respond to that feedback? And what circumstances do our bilingual families face that act as barriers to family engagement? And then finally, think about the reflection process. So do our teams and committees reflect the diversity of our community? And how many members are from bilingual families? So what we're going to do is we're going to break out into 3 different groups. So if you want to just take a picture of this so you know what topic you're going to be talking about, and you can have a discussion, and then we'll meet back and talk again. So one group number 1 will be focused on the engagement, group number 2 on feedback, and group number 3 on reflection.
And Leslie, can we leave one group in the main room? Would that be okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Just making breakout rooms. Sorry, give me 1 second.
That's okay. Actually, while you do that, Teresa put in a comment in the chat. We did a family math night, which brought families together in classrooms, taught the math concepts through games. That's exciting. Love to hear more about that, Teresa.
You want me to talk for a few minutes now
Sure.
or later? Yeah, we're finding that families were struggling with helping their kids with math. So we had a couple of family game nights, and we would invite the families, and we would just set up math games, and basically would teach them the games so that they understood how to help their kids with those concepts. And it was very successful. It was very informal. People just came after work, and it really was a nice time to interact. And again, we taught the games, but then let everybody play and just let the families kind of take over. So it was really nice. It was a really good idea. Very valuable.
That sounds great. Thanks for sharing that. I just sent the invite to the breakout rooms. Okay, so we're all going to stay in the main room here. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise. So, and I'm sorry, I was making the breakout rooms. Did Soha say she wanted us to talk about number 1, 2, or 3? Did she say?
I don't think that was said. So whichever room we are.
Okay, that's fine. So any reflections on current practices? What do you guys think?
To?
Oh, sorry, Shannon, we couldn't hear the beginning.
Which one are we focusing on?
So any of them, I think any of them would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I liked some of the ideas, you know, any like the coffee with the principal. They do that at where my son goes to school, but at my school, we don't have anything set up like that. So, and then, you know, yeah, doing more events in general that welcome everybody. And then, you know, and the idea of a survey was great as well. But I don't know, as far as a leadership role, like how would you get, you know, because in my experience, you know, my EL families are the ones that seem to lack or aren't as engaged as my other families often. And maybe it's something I'm doing, or maybe it's something the schools, you know, that they're not feeling welcome. Like, how would, you know, I don't know. That's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Has anybody ever tried a coffee with the teacher kind of thing?
No.
I've never tried that, but I was wondering if that would just kind of create a space where we can talk to families and ask for their input on a more informal basis than the official conferences or the back to school night.
It's so interesting because it's such a great idea. I'm like, why didn't I think of that?
I wish I had done it when I was a teacher. It's another thing on our plates, but it doesn't have to be that often, even just maybe 1 or 2 a year could be helpful.
I was just thinking about this when Shannon was talking, and I was thinking, we just seem to be moving away from community events in schools. At least in my area, it just used to be where there were, different events that we would focus on. And I just know where, around me, it just seems like it's getting less and less. And I know some districts, they don't do open house anymore. And it just seems to get less and less and less. And it's so essential to be able to, it's so opposite of what we're learning. And, in this seminar, how vital and important it is to keep that connection. And I feel like our society, our culture, whatever is happening, it feels like it's being pulled away.
Yeah.
So maybe we're overwhelmed. Maybe, teachers don't realize, like you said, another thing on our plate, but we're actually making it easier for ourselves if we make those connections.
Yeah. Do any of your schools use parent mentors, parents mentoring other parents, or anything like that? Okay.
No, my the PTA, we have like like a welcoming to like new families or like kinder families to tell them about the school and programs and at the beginning of the year, but nothing beyond that. So
That's a good idea, though. I like that.
And like right now, I'm very fortunate to work in a bilingual school, and it's Spanish and English, and I speak Spanish and English. So, but I have had multiple students each year where their parents don't speak either Spanish or English. And so that was always difficult. But a few years ago, I did work in Sacramento at Howe Avenue Elementary, and that was so different. We were getting a lot of refugee students from the Middle East. And I remember working in a first grade classroom where almost a third or more of the kids were of this background, where Spanish, of course, was not their language or nor English, right? And so the school, and it was school wide. So I remember the principal really looking for ideas, and she hired a few people that spoke, because they don't speak only one language. They come from different areas, right? And so in the reflection piece, do our teams and communities reflect the diversity of our community? Like, I feel that she did a great job in trying to bring help to our campus, help in the communication piece, because then those liaisons were able to help with the communication from parent to either teacher, or teacher to parent, or principal to parent. And it was amazing how right before that happened, that change where she brought upon, like, I think it was 3 or 4 people that could interpret and really be part of the school community, the communication between the families and the teachers was minimal to none. And then once that started, like, you could see more parents come to the school. Like, it was like a sudden change. And so, yeah, just on the reflection piece, I think it's so important when a school takes that into consideration and tries to do something so that the school reflects, those bilingual families.
So important. And so Celia, I know your school does have, it seems like there were a lot of like parent events, and I know like you were inviting parents into your classroom, and Seal was doing things with parents. Is there anything that could be helpful to the rest of the group that you've experienced?
Definitely. Like, at the end, we have units that we follow throughout the year, 6 different units that we follow, and it's K through 6th. And what we do that really engages parents is, at the end of each unit, we have what's called a gallery walk. And so this is where the child becomes the teacher to their parent. So you don't really need a teacher. The student who will speak the language of the parent will come in and act as the teacher, and will take the parent around the whole classroom. We set it up where all of their work is up on the walls and on the tables. And so it's a gallery that the child takes his or her parent or their parent around, and the child is teaching their parent everything they learned through their work. So that, yeah, you're right. That definitely is like an amazing thing to provide, where the parent becomes really involved. And I think tension falls because it's not about me anymore, the teacher. It's the parent and the student. So that works out really well.
And so they do it all in their home language, right? The kid takes the parent around and shows off all the work and is explaining what they've learned in their home language, right?
Yeah.
I think that's such a good idea. Hey, is everyone else coming back in now? Okay, let me check on my colleagues really quick. All right, so we're all coming back together. Oh, Suzanne, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Saha said their group is done too. They should be coming back here.
Great, thanks.
Sure. There we go.
I think everyone's back.
Yeah, we had some great conversation in our group. Saha, I think you're muted.
I didn't even realize I did that. We did as well. We had great conversation. So maybe we can do a quick recap for group number 1. Does someone want to share out any pieces of information that you'd like to share with the group?
Was that breakout group 1 or the main meeting room? I'm always confused as to which one.
Ours was breakout room 1, and we did the first question, so I'm not sure what the main group did.
So we kind of talked about everything.
Yeah, we did too.
Okay.
Yeah, and Erica had to step out, but Cynthia or Kathy, do either one of you want to share kind of what we talked about? Or I can too.
I can start, and Cynthia, do you want to just chime in? Awesome. Okay. Well, we talked about wanting to address with the families what the roadblocks are that typically prohibit them from engaging in school meetings so that we could help remove any of those roadblocks. We talked about having, again, that idea of that parent leadership formed, and even possibly a family engagement team at the school that would support that parent leadership group. We talked about offering different ways that they could engage, even if they didn't feel like it wasn't in their comfort zone to engage on an academic level. One of our members, and we also had this at my last school, provided an opportunity for parents to stay after the drop-off that didn't feel comfortable working in the classrooms, but that could sit down and do some work and sit together. And they formed their own little kind of community there where they would come every Friday, and we would provide pan dulce, and they would, cut things or sort things. And they felt like they were contributing in a way that was equal to their comfort level. So we talked about those certain ideas. And Cynthia, if you want to work in some more ideas.
We also talked about, someone brought up having translation like headphones so that families don't feel like they have to be sitting in a group where the translator is, that they can be still engaged in the conversation and listening, and that there's someone they could send their question to that could translate for them. And also like making sure that families know that ahead of time, so they don't go to the meeting or not go to the meeting because they don't know if there's translation available, or if they just feel uncomfortable with the unknown, making sure they know that this is an option available for you that you could use. And also maybe in that survey, reaching out to any parent and asking if they would want to be a leader, willing to reach out to other parents and help them along the way.
Good points. So the headphones, could you clarify that for just a minute? So the translator would be speaking and the parents would hear it on their own.
Yeah,
headphones?
That was Erica actually who brought that up, and she's going to get back on here in a few minutes. She had to switch devices, but she said that they would have headphones, they would have a translator, a real-time translation. So somebody translating at the same time, let's say at a different part of the room, they'd have the headphones, and then if they had questions, the translator would relay those questions as well.
That's a fabulous idea. All right, thank you. And then our next group, the group that was talking about feedback, that was the group I was in. So if anyone wants to share out on what we talked about.
I'll start, and then my fellow comrades can jump in. So we talked about some of the barriers being, devices, not having the devices to find out like when the meetings were happening. And then some of the other ones were, multiple jobs. Parents have multiple jobs and can't attend the meetings, or also childcare issues. So I know at our school, I mentioned that we try to get high school helpers to come for community service hours, and then do childcare so that the parents can attend. Because otherwise, if there's no childcare, a lot of the parents just don't feel comfortable coming, especially if it's in a parent-only meeting. So that was some of the barriers. You guys jump in and.
We were kind of all over the place. I feel like it's hard to summarize what we talked about, because we talked about a lot of stuff. We also talked about how there's like that barrier and that feedback with parents of, wanting to respect the teacher and like not always like talking at the same level, where we're talking about this approach and they've only learned it this way. So then we can't always, see eye to eye. Or they just reach out when they have problems, like with the technology or with, like, I can't get this to work. But one of the team members had done something in the past where she would do feedback surveys each trimester, I think she said, where she would ask the parents about what was your child's favorite activity and why was it beneficial. So trying to find out more information and like what was good about it. How can I replicate this like more so, what she found was a useful format, as opposed to just being like, hey, how you doing? Okay, yeah, that's great. Anything going on? Okay, we're good. Like where, sometimes they're more on the spot, but it gave them the framework and that focus to offer some really good feedback for her teaching practices.
Yeah, that was a fantastic idea. Actually, I like that. And that goes back to what we were talking about, of really taking the pressure off and making it more of an informal way of saying it. Just tell me what you liked and why you liked it. So definitely a good idea with that one. All right. And the final group.
We talked about a lot of different things. I'll highlight a couple and then my colleagues can jump in. So I know I was thinking about, I wish I had done, as when I was a teacher, coffee with the teacher, and just creating like this kind of informal time when I could talk to parents and ask them their ideas about things and share opinions and that kind of thing. Just maybe even once or twice a year. And then we heard some interesting things. Actually, can I ask Cecilia to share some of the things she was talking about? Where did she go? Oh, I think she stepped out. So I'll do my best to share what she had said. So one of the schools she worked at had parent liaisons that spoke the languages of the community and were part of their culture, and that really helped a lot. So I know I've seen some schools that do that, and I think that's always really, really helpful. And then she also was talking about a program called SEAL that she uses at her school. And I know because I used to have student teachers in her classroom, and I've seen this happen at the end of every unit. They bring all the parents in and they do a gallery walk, and they put all the work up on the walls, and the children are the teachers to their parents. And so they're speaking their home languages, and they take the parent around and show them all the work, and they're teaching the parents all the things that they've learned in that unit. And then they structure some activities where the parents are, providing some input and reflections and some ideas back, but all in their home languages. And then they do this share out across languages. That's really cool. Anybody else want to jump in?
All right, so I think we're ready to go ahead and continue on. Thanks for all that wonderful feedback. It's really good to hear different perceptions and what people are doing and what you're piggybacking off of possible ideas that you could be doing. Great feedback and comments for this. Thank you, everyone. So Leslie, if you wouldn't mind going back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
All right, so let's briefly talk about what the research says. When we're talking about family advocacy, it's a process of engaging bilingual families as key decision makers in shaping activities and programs that promote student learning. So again, at the end of the day, student learning is really what we are trying to reiterate, and the point of everything that we're doing is for the benefit of our students. We want to make sure that schools value those diverse perspectives and help shape those positive bilingual identities. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about are focus groups, really getting parents involved and hearing their feedback on what's going on with specific questions. We're going to be talking about those when we get to our tools, different committees that can be formed, and just utilizing feedback from families. And you'll see here it says that Ferlazzo and Hammond suggests that the purpose of organizing focus groups or committees with families playing a key role to succeed and solve issues. So the issue focused on should be specific and non-divisive. So we want to make sure that we're really making this positive and working together to make it something that's not intimidating for families and really inviting for families.
So if I could jump in really quick, something to think about with the focus groups is, we need to think about the kinds of decisions that families can make and how teachers and schools can really elicit and incorporate their input. Because, realistically speaking, there's some things that just, the administrator has to decide, right? And kind of make those decisions where the families may not are privy to all the ins and outs of, how the school runs and functions. So something to think about, what is it that we can have them, what are the kind of decisions that we can have them make? And how can we incorporate that input? And then I'm thinking of, these school community council committees where the parents are the majority of the membership. So we want to really think about including parents on other appropriate school teams as well. And really just trying to focus on seeking their input in decisions made by school teams and in plans for school improvement. So, what type of school improvement committees do we have and how are we really including parents in those conversations and in those decisions?
Thank you, Suzanne. All right, so next we're going to take a moment just to talk about barriers to participation. Leslie, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So when we're talking about barriers, we think about families belonging to non-dominant groups. And again, we've talked about this. They might feel marginalized by the school system, be intimidated by academics in English and not being familiar with the language, being unaware of expectations. So again, we know that this is all coming together when we're talking about relationships, when we're talking about communication, and again, and especially when we're talking about advocacy, because now we're asking you to take on a role where you're helping to make decisions. So these feelings of exclusion can really act as barriers for participation. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we can do to try to break those barriers down and be more inviting. So Suzanne, I'm going to ask you if you want to go ahead and talk about some of the ways we can break those barriers.
Yeah, so ways to really improve participation, to really empower the families to really actively engage in the child's school experience and to really support their academic success. We as educators, we have to understand that all families, they want their children to be successful in school. We all have that same common goal. And so some ways to improve participation, and Leslie, if you don't mind going to the next slide, we've got some ideas here for you. Be explicit about how families can engage. Really, communicate that and be explicit about it. Practices such as translanguaging might encourage families to join in on decision-making endeavors because they can really draw upon their own and other, team members' linguistic resources to improve that communication and understanding to really help solve problems. So you want to build on that, that piece as well. So using language as a resource is really going to allow families to be intellectually engaged and to become really active participants. So you want to make sure that that is a part of your plan for improving participation. We also want to help families find support through social networks that really help them navigate the school system, and also facilitate interactions that act as bridges between home and school. So let's think about, and we'll share some of this, and we're planning to build more around this, but what are some activities or different things that families can do at home with their children, and maybe present that or share that with the school, with the teacher, so that we have that exchange, that dialogue, so we can really learn more about what are some of the literacy practices that are happening at home, and how you can learn that by sending home some of these activities or engaging them in different opportunities. On the next slide, I have a quote I want you just to take a moment to reflect on here. This is one we came across, I believe, in some of the research that we did. The more parents have the opportunity to shape activities and programs that help their families, the more invested they will be in seeing those efforts succeed. So do you agree with this? I see a lot of nodding. Have you experienced this? Has anyone experienced situations where parents really have had that opportunity to shape activities in your school, or to shape a program in your school, or to be a part of that building of a program? Helping other families. I know some of that conversation came up in our breakout groups, and things that have happened, like I'm thinking of the math night and different things like that. But have any one of you had any specific experience with maybe having parents as leaders, and how that's helped maybe other families and other parents to become more engaged?
At my school, we have a really strong PTA and family community, not necessarily specifically like bilingual families, but we have just in general, a really strong family community at my site. And those parents really do rally each other to be like, okay, we've got this coming up. Like, we are going to support the schools. And I mean, they do a lot for our school. So I can see it that way, but specifically just with bilingual families, I don't know that I have a example specifically for that. I know within my class this year, now that we're in person again, my bilingual families have kind of matched up with each other, and at pickup time, they'll wait with each other and be like, oh, I see your mom now, and they'll walk together, and kind of they're building their own little community together with one another. But that's not exactly what this quote is talking about.
That's okay though, because it's still an example of them taking some sort of leadership role, right? And working together as a community. So, in some ways, it's, even though it's a smaller example, right? It's not, but they are still, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to show you a quick video. It's not very long. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgot about approaches before I get to the video. Some approaches and ideas to really getting your families more engaged and to really become key decision makers. We have these on the slide here. So just some ideas, and these are taken from Colorín, Colorado. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that website, but if you're not, then you definitely want to write it down, because there are so many resources for our emergent bilinguals in there. Colorín, Colorado is the site, and these are taken from there. Some suggestions are to perhaps create a committee of emergent bilingual parents to address questions and concerns. Maybe consider designating parent leaders in each language group to engage other parents. So if you've got, 3 dominant language groups, think about who are maybe your most outspoken, or your more parent leaders who kind of want to take charge, and think about designating those folks as leaders for other parents. Brainstorm with your EB parent leaders about ways to recruit and mentor new parents. So again, this goes back to what I think it was Paula who talked about this, really getting parents to draw others in. Learn from your parents' experiences and find out what they think will make a positive impact on future parents who are new to the US school system. So a great way to get them to engage in conversation with you, and maybe even as they're, let's say they're leaving your school and they're going on to middle school, their children are moving on, kind of almost like as an exit interview, right? Tell me about your experiences as you were here and kind of learning about the US school system and navigating our school. What are some things that we can do to do differently and to have more of a positive impact on other parents who are coming in? As parents prepare to step away from leadership responsibilities, ask them if they would be willing to mentor new parent leaders who are joining the community. And a little bit later, we're going to show you a mentoring tool that we've created to kind of help achieve that. And asking families for their recommendations of other parent leaders that they might have gotten to know. I was just in my son's student site council meeting right before this and in our Zoom. And that was one of the things we ended with, who are other parent leaders as people are leaving the committee, they've done their time, who are other parent leaders that you think might be able to serve in this role? So again, using those parents as resources. They network, they network, they talk, and you just, drop one thing and they'll find you somebody. So, really utilizing families and asking for recommendations. What other parent leaders can we recruit? All right, so the next thing I want to show you is a quick video. And this is Yvette Monterosa, and she is a parent of 2 children attending Wolf Street Academy in Baltimore, Maryland. And she's also the PTO president and has shown important leadership on behalf of the school and its families. The school is more than 80% Latino. It's a community school in Baltimore, Maryland. 76% of Wolf Street's students are English learners, and 96% live in poverty. So as you listen to Yvette, I want you to think about, what do you notice about this parent? Just even in terms of her body language, like, what do you notice about her? What are some of the things that she shared? And we'll talk a little bit about that after we watch it.
Click here to view the video and then return back to this presentation.
All right, so again, really short video, but just, I think, a great example of a parent leader. What do you notice about her? What do you notice? I love how it says, I was a little shy, because she doesn't seem shy now. She seems very confident, right? Very empowered.
And I think about, had someone not approached her and said, you'd be a great resource in order to, give this a try, she may have never had the incentive or the motivation or the idea that it would be possible for her to be able to do that.
Great point. Yeah. She's very confident. And I love that.
I like how she said she's putting in her time. She's volunteering. She's showing up. She's helping out with whatever she can do. And that's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, she values that. She values, giving back, and sees that is something that she should be engaged in, others should be engaged in. And I could see her really as this parent leader who's going to recruit. And I would love to follow up and see what kind of recruitment has happened. But I guarantee there's been a lot of recruitment with people in the community.
Seems that people must really trust her because they all come to her. She said a lot of people come to her and ask questions, and if she doesn't know, I'm sure she passes them on to someone else, but just that ability to be approachable by other families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
She looks really young and unintimidating. So I just feel like I could see why parents go to her, because if it's a lower poverty school, it's not someone who is going to look down on them, because she's right there with them. And so she just appears to be like, I'm just one of you, and I'm just going to do whatever I can. So that's kind of the vibe I get from her.
Great. Thank you, Paula. Okay, so Just an example kind of to think about, and you may have some ideas of who in your school might you think about even for next year, recruiting as a parent leader. You know, do you have somebody, do you have a parent or a family member of one of your students that you think might be good in a leadership role like this, who could really, you know, recruit others and be passionate? So just something to think about. I was going to share one other video with you, but I think for time's sake, we're going to move on to the tools. So Leslie, I think we can skip the next one. The next one was just something from a kind of like an administrator perspective, but I wanted to get into the tools and resources because I think that this is really important. You will find on the Padlet, I'm going to ask you all to go to the Padlet, and you will find a section or a column that's called Read Created Tools Advocacy. So you'll see that, you know, we've created these columns for each one of the sections here, but the one I want you to look at today is advocacy. And our first tool that's on the list, and I'm actually not going to spend time looking at this, but the advocacy survey questions, you actually have seen this document before. It's the first document in that list. I'm sorry, it's the second document on that list there. I need to move it. These reflection questions, you've seen these before because in this document, we have reflection questions for communication, relationships, and advocacy. And in here, this document is really just created for you to have, and you can really leverage these reflection questions in different ways. But if you're having staff discussions, or I know one of the folks, I think it was Kathy, mentioned that at my school, I think we should have a family engagement team at the school. So if that's something that you have planned, that you want to have a family engagement team at your school, or even just talk about it as a school or as a grade level, these are some questions that you can engage in to really reflect on where you all are as in terms of advocacy. So again, there's reflection questions for communication, for advocacy, and for relationships. But I wanted to post that again so that you all have that in case you need it. So yes, I will post the link to the Padlet for you so that you can have that at your fingertips. Here you go. Thank you, Leslie. So you'll see all those reflection questions there. I wanted to also draw your attention to another tool, and it's called discussion protocols. And that is on the Padlet. That's the very first one that's listed. These are discussion protocols for bringing community members together for collaboration. So what this is the information in that protocols document is really a guide to facilitate conversation. So once you do have your families in these committees that you have, or you've brought them in, you're trying to engage them, you can use these suggested protocols to structure your conversations when you're engaging them in discussions and decision making. So I wanted to let you know that that is in there as well, a great guide for you to use. It depends on the purpose of the protocol, the name of the protocol. So if you open that up, you can take a look. Thank you for opening that and modeling for us, Leslie, appreciate it. But you'll see there's some different suggestions there. So again, once you feel that you're ready, you have families in and you want to engage them in conversations, those discussion protocols are going to be really, really helpful. The next tool that I wanted to share with you is called the Involvement Engagement Continuum. And again, this is something that you can use as a staff. Maybe this is something you want to show your principal, something to reflect on, kind of where are we on this involvement and engagement continuum? And, we've all kind of reflected on this already in our breakout rooms, where you think you are. But remember that family involvement to the left there is that school-centered piece. And so, we've kind of have this continuum here where you're reporting information out to families. You're connecting, you're slowly recruiting, you're collaborating, you're partnering, and then you're empowering. So kind of where do you think you are on this continuum as a school or maybe as an individual? And this would be something if you know, if this is a focus for you to really a goal for you to move from one end of that continuum to the other, what are you going to do to get there? So this is a great tool for you to use, again, to engage in self-reflection or reflection as a school, and to have to elicit conversation as a staff. I wouldn't necessarily use this with families, but this is more, you know, for you to use as a teacher and with your staff. I also actually think, you know, I just said I wouldn't use this with our families, but it would be interesting to use maybe a different version of it with your families, because they could even identify on that continuum where they think they are, or where they feel that the school presents itself as a whole. And then the other tools I'm going to let, I think Soha's going to share the mentoring with us, right? And the last one.
Yes. So we're going to take a moment to talk about a tool that we developed called Parents Mentoring Parents, and really talking about the different things that we talked about today in giving parents the tools that they need in order to go ahead and come into these advocacy roles. And so if you see the page that we're looking at now, it talks about what are some different things we can do. We can support parents in becoming advocates for their child, offer trainings to help parents learn new skills. When we're talking about mentorship, encouraging parent involvement and taking on those leadership roles, and teaching parents about the educational system. So how can they take a more active role by learning about the system and what it involves? And so when we continue down, one of the questions we ask are, what can mentorship programs offer? So we could offer parents understanding of community resources that are available. So what are some outreach that can help our families? We can offer English classes to our bilingual families. So let's make it an educational experience to help empower them. We can create leadership trainings, and it can be a trickle-down effect. We as a school, as a community, we train a group of parents on these leadership trainings, and those parents in turn go back and train other parents on those skills that they've learned. And then learning essential technology skills. So things so that parents are feeling more confident, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's through a Zoom meeting. We were talking in our breakout rooms about how much more comfortable we've all gotten with Zoom meetings and technology and our screens being on and us being more present. And prior to COVID, I think a lot of people were very uncomfortable with it. So it took us out of our comfort zone, and it took a while for us to get to that point. And like some people said, we were forced into it. We didn't have a choice. We had to come up with that. And so it's hard getting parents out of those comfort zones and really helping them through these processes. So it's not just becoming an advocate overnight. It's giving the skills we need as a whole and as a community to build on that. And even something as simple as understanding the health system. Where can I go if I need help for my students or my children or my family? I don't know where to go. So where are those resources that are available? And let's talk for a moment next about how things can be structured through this process. So again, just briefly, it could be a situation where the first round of parents are trained, they train the future incoming parents. Parents can sign up for training that they're interested in learning more about. We can set consistent dates and times for predetermined amount of hours, and parent mentors can gain in-depth skills to help themselves to be able to pass that information along to others. So they're gaining confidence, they're achieving their goals, their personal goals, and they're learning more about the school system as well through these programs. So again, it takes a lot more effort. It's a much deeper level that we're talking about, but we're hoping that at the end, it's going to be very rewarding. So what are things that you should think about? You should be willing to provide those leadership opportunities, provide babysitting, translation, and really putting together that training for that beginning group to get them involved in this, and creating that community awareness so that we're breaking those barriers, whether it's language barriers, income barriers, disability barriers. It's all about breaking that down and giving everybody that comfort level. And then finally, just thinking once again about establishing that trust and rapport. So participating in those school advisory committees, policy development, if it's appropriate. And again, like Suzanne said, really making sure that it's things that are appropriate for parents to be making those decisions for, but also making sure that we're allowing those things to happen as well. It might be budgeting decisions where there's a group that says, here's the remaining, here are what our options are. What would you like to see done with that? So it might just not be an open resource. We're kind of guiding in the directions of what within the realm of what we're able to do, essentially. So that's really what we wanted to take the time in looking at when we're talking about mentorship programs and help building those up. And this is delving in deeper, and it is going to take time, and it does take a bit of commitment on a whole school-wide level in order to get to this.
Can I add just a couple quick things, Soha?
Sure.
In my breakout group, somebody mentioned how great it would be to have a school committee, like a leadership team of teachers and other school staff that are helping to lead this work, to help to recruit the parents. And so that's something, instead of just like an individual teacher, getting a team of people to help get the parents up and running. And then I wanted to mention that at one of the schools I worked at, we were hosting a parent language exchange. So I know it says offering English classes here. Well, we had parents that were English-speaking parents were teaching English to Spanish-speaking parents, and the Spanish-speaking parents were teaching Spanish to the English-speaking parents. And so they were exchanging languages, and their language teaching, they weren't writing lesson plans. They came up with conversation questions, and they would engage in 30 minutes of Spanish conversation and then 30 minutes of English conversation. So I think there are a lot of different ways that the school can help structure this, help get the word out, and the things like that to help get this parent group up and running. And then they just ran with it, like did it mostly by themselves.
Thank you, Leslie.
I think the last thing we're going to talk about, we only have a few minutes, but Soha, I did have a slide around what I wanted to get their thoughts on this. So maybe we can do an abbreviated version on that. The questions families can ask.
Other questions?
Yeah. So Soha, sorry, you want to go ahead and talk about this?
No, you go ahead and.
So we have this resource for you, but it's we're not really calling this a finalized tool or a finalized resource, because we want to get your input on this. And so questions families can ask teachers, kind of just take a look at this for a second here. A lot of times families are not quite sure what to ask or what they're allowed to ask or what are the right questions to ask. And so we have some suggestions, but we kind of want to get your thoughts on what do you think about this? What do you think about this, giving this to parents? What are your thoughts? So there's actually, Leslie, if you want to go to the application slide right after that, I have questions I want them to think about. So what are your thoughts on this particular tool? The questions parents can ask, and it's in the Padlet. So if you wanted to open it and look while we look at the questions here. Do you have thoughts about this? Do you like this? Do you see this as problematic? What are your thoughts?
I feel like it's a really helpful tool. I think a lot of parents going in, especially if they have a younger student, don't know what questions to ask when it comes to a parent conference or back to school night. So I think giving them some options, some ideas will start to roll, and then they can come to those meetings feeling like they have a better idea of what they're interested in knowing more about.
Okay, great thoughts, great points. Thank you. Laura?
One thing that I noticed is the academic language that you used in it. So you said differentiate. I don't know that the parents would know what that is, so they wouldn't know what they're asking. So I would encourage you to look at the verbiage because it's very academic. But if you don't have that background, especially if you're learning English or are not familiar with English, just maybe rephrasing some of them so that they're more approachable.
Wonderful feedback. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. Anybody else?
I also I mean, most of us like in a back to school night or, the beginning of the year, welcome back kind of thing, answer all of those questions in our presentation. But if parents had it prior, were got it at home and were able to review it, they would already have kind of the pre-knowledge of what we were going to be discussing and talking about, and they could kind of familiarize themselves with the types of questions we'd be answering. So it's almost like that, that I can't think of it right now, but the CALPS, the bricks and CALPS, they already have that, that knowledge to come in prepared and be ready.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's setting them up for success too. Even if they didn't raise their hand and ask one of those questions, they just kind of come with that background. There we go, background knowledge.
Excellent points. And I think as a team, we all agree and had those same thoughts and same discussions. The only other flip side to that is we were thinking, could this be perceived as kind of the opposite of what we're trying to advocate for, right? Well, advocacy, I use the word advocacy. We want families to become advocates. We want them to be key decision makers. And so that if we as teachers are giving them these questions, are we then kind of negating that whole idea that here's what you should be asking versus what do you think you should be asking? So that was kind of our conflict of how do we get around that? Maybe it's how we frame this. Julie, our colleague, our team leader here had mentioned that maybe we could present these as an FAQ in an FAQ format. That could be one option. And Leslie, I know that you had talked about framing it also within, Leslie Enzo has talked about framing it more within the mentorship program and maybe tying it to that. And so we'd love your thoughts about that. What do you think? And Leslie and Soha, I hope I communicated that clearly. I agree with everything that was said, that what everyone shared, but I struggle with, I almost feel like if it didn't come from the school, then we wouldn't have this conflict I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we also mentioned maybe having a place where parents can write in their own question. What do you want to know? What do you want to ask teachers? To have it be a little bit more back and forth. And then if it were part of the mentoring program, what could that look like? Would that be other parents saying, hey, here are some questions you can ask, or even saying I asked my kids teacher these questions, or, kind of sharing back and forth between parents like that?
I agree with what you're saying of the idea of we want them to come up with questions. I think too, though, we're talking about some families just don't feel comfortable yet in those meeting environments. I think this would be a really good tool just to make them feel that they at least have some idea of what's going to be discussed, and that if they needed to, they have something they could pull from. And then I do feel so many of the questions will get them to start thinking of other questions that they have on their own. But I think it's just that little stepping stone for them to open up and be willing to participate and feeling comfortable to participate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we were wanting to start with something that would help them know well, what can I ask, and what, what's acceptable to ask, and just giving them permission to ask these kinds of questions.
Especially if it's their first child coming into the school system and they don't have any prior, older sibling, older children, they have no idea what to expect. So it would be beneficial.
Yeah, and so we really appreciate your thoughts and your feedback on this. It's almost kind of like a little mini tool review in 3 minutes. And so, I love us thinking together through this. And so I know that Soha has created more of a description that kind of goes along with this. So You'll be seeing a different version of this soon on the Padlet. So wanted to just make you aware of that. But those are the tools that we have to share, and we invite you to, I know we only have 2 minutes left, we invite you to engage in some other application. And so on the next slide, this is kind of how we like to end each of our sessions, and we invite you to record your responses on the Padlet. But thinking about maybe what you can do to improve how you are going to engage families as advocates for their child's learning. So thinking about maybe what tweaks, what things can you do or think about doing in the fall for the next school year where you can really engage families in decision-making, or maybe in some of the planning activities at your site. So we'd love for you to think about that and to record some of your ideas. We're not asking you to go and like actually do something and then come back and report back. If you want to do that, fantastic. But we know that that's probably not going to happen. But what are you thinking? What's going on in your head? We would love to hear or read about your thoughts for the upcoming school year. So we appreciate you responding on the Padlet to this question. And that application is in its own column on the Padlet. And you'll find that right after the advocacy tools, the advocacy application. So if you wouldn't mind completing that. And then our last bit of, I know we wanted to talk about, I have a housekeeping slide in there right after that. Leslie, again, if you have questions about any of the things that we talked about in the beginning in terms of housekeeping, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. But before we finish today, I want to share with you all our feedback survey. The link is in the chat. For those of you who had to leave and join on your phones, I promise to send out a follow-up email, and I'll make sure to include this link in the email as well. But if you wouldn't mind taking a few moments to complete the session evaluation, this is going to really help us improve our work and really tailor these webinars to your needs. So we want to thank you all for your time and for your attention today. And we really enjoyed working with all of you. If you have any colleagues that were not able to join us today, I'll also send out the recording in that email. You can still participate in all three by watching the recordings and completing that application on the Padlet. So you'll still get credit for that. You'll get credit for the bonus for all three if you watch the recording and respond. Leslie or Soha, is there anything else that I missed or that you wanted to share?
No, just thanks everyone for being here. We look forward to receiving your tool reviews and seeing you again if you signed up for that focus group.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks.
Yeah.